I'm so happy to be here with you. Today, I'm going to bring you a really practical episode. I want to talk to you. I had some listener requests for this episode. I want to talk to you about what I do with my own money. And I'm going to tell you a little bit in the form of a story and a journey because it has really changed. And of course, me becoming more financially savvy and growing my business and having more financial economic power has really changed the amount of money that I have. It's changed my options. And of course, the knowledge and know-how that I have about how to handle my money is completely different than it was when I was starting, when I knew literally nothing. So stay tuned. But first, I just want to mention a thank you to those of you who reached out to me after my last email newsletter and after my last podcast, because I actually was really nervous about it. I recorded a podcast for the 4th of July about feeling patriotic, about actually really loving this country. And I know that for Democrats, for liberals, people on the left, that is not a popular sentiment. And I fully get that. And there is real reason to feel worried, to feel disillusioned. Those things are legit. I'm not here to say this country is perfect or even that or to gloss over and ignore things that are really deeply, deeply wrong and broken. But on the other hand, there are other countries that are broken too. And I do think that we have been making a lot of progress. And if you just step back a decade, 2 decades, 5 decades, things are better now than they used to be. Civility, our trust in one another is at an all-time low. And I think that probably is the biggest problem. But we've made a lot of progress as a people with empathy, accepting all more and more of us as like truly fully citizens of this nation. That share keeps increasing. Of course, we're not all the way there. Of course, there's a horror show for trans youth, especially right now. But I just want to be here to give you the real facts about what has been in these bills that the Democratic Congress up until 2022 has been passing successfully, which are so filled with genuine progressive action towards climate change. And Biden specifically has been doing so much work to build back the US economy and manufacturing base, to onshore jobs to the United States. When you read the tax bills, the Biden administration has done so much to help rural people, people in red states, people without college degrees, manufacturing. It is a freaking miracle. It's something that honestly, other Democrats like Obama, who I loved, didn't do a good job at. So I think there's a lot to celebrate. And, I think if we only focus on what's wrong, there's plenty wrong. But if we only focus on that and we don't actually see and celebrate and notice what's good, where will we be? Puddles of depressed goo that are not capable of any kind of meaningful action, right? We have to, I think it's important to celebrate and feel the joy that we rightfully deserve for the good things we've accomplished. Okay, so I was super worried when I put out that episode in that newsletter that I would get some serious blowback. I was worried. And I just want to say I've been deeply heartened by those of you listening who've sent me messages of support. I think a lot of you are looking for hope. And it's really encouraging to me when you tell me that it's helping you, like my podcast is helping you feel that hope. That is a very serious part of my mission. I don't know if you noticed the name of my business, Sunlight, the name of this podcast, but that is a huge underlying core value of mine. I don't know if you know the legend of Pandora's box, this Greek myth. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but Pandora was this curious woman who was told not to open this box. The world was a wonderful place, blah, blah, blah. And she opened the box and all the good things of the world escaped. And so the world became filled with despair and depression and corruption and all these terrible things. But she did manage to close the box in time to leave one last thing inside of it. And that thing inside is hope. And it's really sad. It's a sad myth, but I really I think about it a lot because, you know, the world has seen dark times. We're not the only ones facing dark times. I mean, the Middle Ages, I think, were pretty terrible. I think there's no time in human history that I would rather be reborn into. I would not want to exist before vaccines, before penicillin, antibiotics. I mean, I wouldn't even want to be reincarnated as a pharaoh. You know, I just think, like, even if you were at the tippity top, I still think this time is still the best time, especially if you're going to be born as a woman. So anyway, hope, I think, is super important. It's what I named my company for, in part. And thank you for those messages, because, you know, I need it too. I need it too. I need to know that that my work is meaningful. And like, when it is meaningful to you, when you tell me so, it really helps keep me going. And so I really appreciate you. I just wanted to say that. So, you know, the other thing I want to say about that, about hope and about optimism, is that, you know, I was born very lucky. I do come from a lot of privilege. I don't want to gloss over that. I am not a perfect person by any means, and I'm not optimistic by nature. In fact, boy, my mom is such a pessimist. It's sometimes really surprises me. But but I've had really hard things in my life. You know, privilege does not stop you from having a miscarriage. It does not stop your mom from getting cancer. It doesn't stop really, really hard things from happening, right? I've had a lot of pain in my life, and I have had a lot of opportunity to be very, very depressed and very, very cynical. I certainly could just choose to orient that way, right? And I have made a deliberate choice towards hope, because to me, it's a miracle that I'm alive. It's a miracle that there is a planet that supports life. It is a miracle that I happen to be lucky enough to be born on it. And what am I going to do with this one shot that I've got? You know, I would rather do what I can with my tiny little bit of agency that I have in this world and try to make it better and try to help other people feel better, and have a better experience, help other people have a better experience. So I really choose joy. I choose hope. I think it's important. And I've spent a lot of time in depression. I left college. I took a leave of absence from Yale for a full year because I was so depressed. Honestly, I was suicidal at the time. I was so depressed about my own privilege and about the unfairness and inequality in the world. And I took a year off to do volunteer work, just to sit on the other side of the tracks for a while. As a person who grew up with privilege, I just felt like I wanted to see the other parts of the world. And I guess I'm not sure where I'm going with that. I guess I just learned that being depressed, having to have every conversation start with a rundown of what's fucked up about our world, is not actually a productive or grateful place to come from. You know, it's just not how I want to live my life. There is plenty of bad in the world, but I just feel, you know, like sometimes when I'm talking to friends who are like a little, in my opinion, too obsessed with the news, too obsessed with negative headlines, and it's like they need to give me the rundown about what's shitty in the world today, I just feel like, you know what, like, can we just agree that gravity exists? Do we have to start every conversation discussing the fact that gravity is there? Like, okay, gravity is there. We don't actually have to start every conversation talking about gravity. Let's just move into like, well, what can we do about it? How are we going to make today a good day? What are we going to do for the world that's good to make it better? And what are we going to do for ourselves to feel a little bit of joy, right? Because like it or not, this is your only shot at life. And, you know, what are you going to do about it? So anyway, that's my kind of basic philosophy. It's hard earned. It is deliberately chosen. It's not an accident. It's not by birth. It's not just my personality. It's a choice. So I really appreciate and thank you for sending me those messages, because I do get down. I am subject to depression, very much so. And, we're here to help each other through this life. That is my belief. And I certainly do this podcast to help you feel better, feel hope, feel optimism, have a path forward. Like, well, this is a thing you can do about it, right? But I need you too. I really do. I need you too. I don't want to be a voice in the wilderness. I love connecting and hearing that it means something to you and hearing the work that you are doing in the world. That makes me feel back in community again. It makes me feel fellowship with other people who care about making this world a better place. And honestly, that's the whole point of why I do what I do at all. That is the point of Sunlight Tax, my business, my work, my effort. And so when you send me those messages that say thank you, or that something brought you meaning, you're bringing me meaning. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And also, I hope you take it seriously, your own sense of joy, your own sense of gratitude for just the fact of being alive. No matter what deck you got dealt by birth, because really we all just have this one shot, and you're not going to do a very good job of fixing what's wrong with this world when you're just a depressed pile of goo on the floor, right? It's hard to take action from a place of hopelessness. So back to my original point, I think hope and a sense of, well, I can work on this one thing. I think that is really all you need. So I just encourage you to think about that for a moment today. And now that I've had my little moment of philosophy to start, let's talk about my own personal journey about what I do with my money. As you know, I teach in Money Bootcamp. Primarily, I teach you how to set up your freelance, your self-employment work to pay taxes, to set up your bookkeeping, pay your quarterly taxes, calculate them, adjust them, etc. But the other half of the program is about what to do with your excess money, how to build your wealth, and how to use tax advantage accounts and tax planning so that you can take a small number of dollars and make them as powerful as possible, right? Because the point isn't that we want you working all the time. The point is make those dollars work as hard as they can so you can work less and you can do more changing the world, having joyful experiences, right? Okay, so that's what my program is. That's what my mission is. And yeah, so I want to talk to you about just the really personal version of like behind the scenes, what I do with my money. 20 years ago, my life looked totally different. I was a full-time artist. I had very little money. I was, there's some privilege in that, right? I chose a career on purpose and I knew that it was not going to be a very lucrative one. But I was living on very little. I mean, just to put things in perspective, I remember very well a summer where I gave up alcohol and I gave up fruit, on purpose to just keep my grocery budget as low as it could be so that I could be in the studio the maximum number of hours possible. Right. So I know what it is like to sacrifice in order to, have this vision, being an artist. And so at that time, if I had heard a person like me now talking about what to do with your money, I actually did pay a lot of attention. I've always been a person who kind of wants to squirrel money away because I sort of never knew where my next dollar might be coming from, where my next painting sale might be coming from. But I was in a very different financial position. I did not have much agency. I really did not have a lot of power in my life. And it began to really wear on me after several years of existing like that and really feeling a lack of economic control and power. I wanted to change. And so I really started paying more attention to financial stuff. I started reading personal finance books. That was sort of the beginning of me getting really interested in fixing my own financial situation. But I might have listened to a podcast like this and been like, oh my God, that she's got money and I don't, I can't even imagine doing those things. Well, I am that lady. I I became that lady, right? From the place of having very little. So I just want you to take some heart in this. I think there are things that you can do. Of course, building a business is a huge part of why I have money. Entrepreneurship is really fucking hard. It is not for everyone. I'm not going to say everybody should build a business because it is so freaking hard. But if you're up for the challenge, and I think a lot of people are, there's real magic in it. So starting this business changed my life. Building a business with a mission to help people, especially creative people. You know, initially my community is a community of creative artists, but it's grown to be other creative people and purpose-driven, mission-driven people who really care about doing a thing in the world versus about just amassing money, right? And at this point, I have seen so much power in creative people, mission-driven people building businesses that it's become my life's work to help you build that business and do smart things with your money along the way and set up your money so it doesn't derail you, right? So I want you to have a change like I did in the amount of power, the amount of agency that you have in your life, and also the impact and the reach of your work. And I think that is the beauty. That is the beauty of creative and purpose-driven people forming businesses, doing their important work, representing, having people like us represented in the world, queer, BIPOC, historically marginalized people, like businesses that serve your specific community, fill the need that you see that nobody else sees. I think that is just magic. So I think it's really rewarding. I think that sense of purpose really drives me, and it really gives me a feeling of contentment. Like that sense of mission to me, it gives my life meaning. So I think that creative people, and I made a whole episode about this recently, so go back and listen to it, but I made a whole episode about the fact that I think creative people specifically are so well positioned to be incredible entrepreneurs. And it's a story that I want to tell because is not the story the rest of the world is telling you, right? If you're a creative person, if you are a woman, a queer person, a historically marginalized person, you're often getting a story that says the opposite. It says money isn't for you, business isn't for you. You should stay out of this, stay in your lane, stay in your zone. Also, we're given this like scarcity mindset and an idea that we're bad with money. And in fact, no, those messages are by design, and they are really meant to keep us out of a predominantly cis white hetero male world. I'm not saying all white men are bad, far from it. But it's trying to keep us out, right? And I'm just here to say, no, fuck that. I want your mission out in the world. I want you represented in the world. I want you to have money, agency, power, mission, fulfillment, right? So let's tell the other story that you can totally do this. And in fact, you are born to do this. There's so much potential. So we just need to shed those attitudes and those stories of scarcity, of incompetence with money, and put in its place the idea that we were born to do this. And we are exactly what the world needs. You, the business you are running, whatever it is, if you're making paintings, if you're making experimental dance theater performances, if you are teaching hip hop dance, if you are building amazing websites, doing incredible branding, if you are speaking on stages, you are doing the work that this world needs. Okay. That's a lot of preamble, but let's jump in. So I want to talk to you. I want to give you the sort of behind the scenes look at what I do with my money. All right. So let's talk about it. So as I started to grow my business, and this is already, I'm talking about a couple years in, right? I had already gotten to the point where I had some traction. The first couple years of my business were just hard, just fucking hard, getting the word out, pushing the flywheel, trying to gain recognition and attention and an audience and like people who build the trust that is necessary for people to come and, hand you their money and see if you can solve their problems, right? So that first couple of years, I'm not going to lie, was really, really hard. It can be a grind. But once I got the flywheel going enough that I started generating some extra money, what did I do with that money? Well, at first, I basically just stockpiled. So I just would keep that money and it would just grow in my business bank account. Over time, I started realizing, okay, I need to separate this. So I would pull the clearly, obviously excess money out of my business bank account. I will put it into its own, actually still a business bank account, but like a separate one. So I felt like I had identified for myself, this isn't operation money. This is like reserves, cash reserves. Okay. So just a stockpile at the beginning. And basically a business emergency fund is a really good idea. Highly suggest. Because things can go wrong, right? It could be a recession. It could be a competitor who suddenly gets really popular. Lots of things can happen that can kind of take your business suddenly in a different direction. Maybe advertising tanks all of a sudden, lots of different things. So an emergency fund is a really good idea. So I had this stockpile emergency fund, and for a while it was just in cash. Of course, once I realized, once it got to a certain level, I was like, okay, this shouldn't just sit for months and months in cash. Inflation is real. Inflation decreases the value of every dollar that you have. So if you're not investing money that you have, your money is losing value over time. So it's important to make sure that your money is not losing value. And you want to have a balance between cash that you can access immediately in the case of an emergency and money that is invested and growing. Generally speaking, when you're investing money, it's harder to access it. And you don't want to be pulling money out of your investments, right? Because you're going to owe tax on it. You're going to owe capital gains. So you generally speaking want to invest only money that is really surplus, money that you don't need to just function on your day-to-day level. So basically, once I figured out that I had some surplus, and I don't necessarily recommend doing it this way, but I just put a huge chunk of it, the surplus, into a well-diversified portfolio of index funds, right? Just a mix of like global and American, small cap, mid cap, and large cap index funds. Okay. That's pretty basic, but it was a big deal for me. I did it stupidly. I did it all in one day, like a big chunk of money all in one day. People don't generally recommend you do that because, the value of all that money could kind of drop really suddenly if the market drops 10, 20% in the next couple of months. It's rare that the market drops 10 or 20%. That's usually a terrible, terrible thing is happening if your money loses 20%. But in theory, it's possible. And that's why you're supposed to sort of space out your investment, like do dollar cost averaging, for example, like put a little chunk in each month at the same time. I didn't do that. I did it all at once. So I'm here to say I am not perfect with my money. I basically know what to do, but I still make mistakes. I still, kind of do the rough cut version. But anyway, put a huge chunk of my surplus into index funds. In other words, into stocks so that it's invested. All right. Now, around that time, possibly a year later, my business was beginning to grow to a point where I was feeling overwhelmed, really overwhelmed, overworked. And it was getting clearer and clearer that I needed to hire. Well, having that stockpile of money, it actually gave me a lot of confidence. Hiring your first employee is really scary, really scary. It's a big commitment. And you need to know it's going to increase your operational costs. So you have to make more money when you hire, right? Supporting just you isn't enough anymore. Now you have to support someone else, right? Someone else's salary. So you have to hire with an eye to, can I, with this hire, increase the capacity of my business? Can I actually bring in more work? Will this enable me at least to be doing more revenue generating activities to help make up for the fact that now I'll be paying twice as much salary out the door. So knowing that I had this cash stockpile, now it was in index funds, right? My surplus, but just looking at the dollar amount, it was enough to pay a full annual salary for a junior person. I actually wasn't even hiring a junior person. I hired someone a little higher than that. But knowing that I had approximately a year's salary for somebody in the bank, that if there was an emergency, like if I needed to, I could spend a full year learning how to be a good boss, learning how to integrate this person into my systems, learning how to get them up to speed with my business, learning how to basically double my revenue to a point where this hire made sense, right? So I looked at that stockpile of money and it gave me the confidence. I was like, I know I can do this in less time than a year. And I have this money that if I needed to pay this person's salary without making any income for a while, I could do it. So to me, that gave me the confidence. I don't think you need to be nearly as conservative as I was. I had a full year's salary in the bank. I think you could have that confidence with 3 months. Honestly, in 3 months, you know if an employee is working or not. And if they're not, you should let them go. That sounds harsh, but it's a good thing. There's no benefit to either party if you have somebody who's a terrible fit for your organization. It will not work. And so it's much better and kinder to be clear and immediate about letting someone go when they are not a good fit for your business. And it's your responsibility to do the due diligence up front, give them test assignments, make sure to the best of your ability that they are a good fit on the front end. So, hire slowly, fire quickly. That is the sort of motto of hiring, and I believe in it very thoroughly. All right, so I hired. Having that money in the bank really is the thing that unlocked the mental hurdle for me of hiring. And just PS, because I did actually see the numbers, like I did increase my capacity immediately. With that hire, I was able to do far more revenue generating work, far more lectures, far more writing, far more visibility, all the stuff that is what gets attention on eyeballs on my business, where people will then learn about my program and join. So it worked. Even though that hire did not actually work out. And I have a whole story about that. That's a separate episode for another time. But even with it being a bad fit and me being, let's be honest, a terrible boss, even with that, it's still sort of on the economic side at the moment. It did pay for itself. It did work. All right. So next, at this point, we're into the COVID years, and they were funky, as we all know. You all had your own COVID stories. Mine were a story of massive growth in my business, but huge overwhelm. Like the need that people had with accountants was enormous, right? PPP loans, expanded unemployment coverage, like all this stuff was just blowing up Sunlight Tax during the COVID years. I got a serious case of burnout because it was so hard to keep up with all of the work. But on the plus side, I made money. So of course that's a pleasant outcome, even though I was fucking exhausted and wanting to burn the whole thing to the ground. So there was a lot of churn, a lot of noise. I hired a bunch. I lost some people. There was a lot of turnover, like lots happened in that COVID period, but I did basically amass another stockpile of money, essentially, because my business grew a lot, right? So at this point, I had already had the experience of taking a stockpile of money, surplus money, and investing it. That is basically the trend of what I continued to do, but I started getting a little wiser, right? I started dialing in how I did it, right? And did it a little less bluntly the next time. So around the time in 2022, around June 2022, when the headlines about interest rates were at their worst, and the stock market was tumbling. And of course, that means, money I put in somewhat recently within the last 1 to 3 years is kind of losing some value. And that's really scary. As an investor, it is scary to see that. It's not fun. But I did know enough to know, well, as the stock market is tumbling, I would like to put money in. I would like to, what they call buy the dip, right? I want to buy it while it's tumbled, and maybe have a little bit of upside to the fact that the stock market went down, because I get to sort of basically get stocks on sale. So I basically did my bookkeeping, figured out what my monthly expenses were. And this is an ongoing project. Like, it's constantly changing in a business that's growing all the time, right? So I had to look back at that year, what a month of expenses look like for 2022, because it's very different from what it looked like in 2021 or 2020. But I basically figured out about maybe 5 months of expenses, kept that as cash reserves in my business bank account, and I moved all of the surplus and I made another investment in index funds, right? I didn't even bother to diversify. I just bought global index funds, large cap. This is not investment advice. I'm just telling you what I did. I'm not, in fact, recommending necessarily that you do what I did, but that's what I did. It turns out my timing was pretty awesome. I don't generally recommend that people try to time the market, although I like to buy things when the market goes down because, you're getting stocks on sale. So it turns out I bought at the absolute bottom of the market, which is pretty awesome. So my stocks have recovered, and I felt pretty cool about that. So basically the next year I did it again, right? So we're up to this year. So at the end of my busy season in 2023, I, carefully did my books. I looked through, I did an evaluation of, like, what does a month of running Sunlight Tax look like? What does a month of expenses look like for me? What level is that at right now? It's actually gone down because I have less staff now than I used to. So how much do I need in my cash reserves for operations through the summer? Now, for me, the summer is a slow period. It's the time when I'm going to make the least amount of income. And so it can feel a little scary to me getting through the summer months because, who wants to think about taxes in July? Most people don't. So then that's fine. That's as it should be. So this time I actually did something a little bit different. Instead of just putting a conservative, like maybe 5 months of cash reserves in my business bank account and moving the rest into investments, I actually made it a little leaner than that. I deliberately made it only 3 months of operating funds that I kept in my business bank account. And I deliberately put the rest kind of on a shelf in another account. And the reason I did this was I decided I wanted to create a little bit of psychological pressure for myself. I wanted to have a kind of 3 month, pretty narrow 3 months of cash reserves so that I wouldn't get into trouble over my 3 leanest months of the year, but that I didn't just have excess cash hanging out in my bank account. Because I think sometimes what happens is I see that I've got enough money to pay my bills and I just kind of let it go, right? But if that number is getting too close to zero, right? If we're getting too close to comfort where that cash reserve is dwindling, and I don't have money coming in, I felt that would be motivational for me to then make some effort and try to bring in more money, whether it is lectures, I do a lot of speaking, whether it is a promotional push, opening up more one-on-one slots, doing a push for Money Bootcamp, etc. Okay. So deliberately, I put a smaller, tighter amount of cash reserves, operational funds in my business bank account, and I pulled the rest out. I did a full owner's draw, so into my personal life. And someone was asking me, I had a listener request that I talk about this method called Profit First. I've never even read that book. It's a very popular book, but the idea behind Profit First is that you pay yourself first. This is a good financial principle. Make sure that you account for yourself making profit and then try to pay out your expenses. And the point there is you do what you prioritize. And if you put profit first, you will actually have some profit. The idea behind Profit First is that when people just have cash, they just pay for stuff. And that you want to create some systems that sort of force you to be profitable. Okay. So I don't claim any expertise on the Profit First method, but basically what I was doing by having this lean cash reserves and by pulling out everything that was excessive and doing an owner's draw, essentially I was taking profit out of my business on the front end and forcing myself to keep my expenses relatively low or run promotions when I need additional money. Okay. So in a way, I was following my own version of a profit first model by doing that. And I did that just a couple months ago. The next thing I will say is that I have been putting some thought into diversifying my investments. At the moment, I'm not that well diversified. I have pretty aggressive portfolio, mostly in stocks because I'm in my 40s. I've got still hopefully decades to go before I really want to pull out that money for retirement. And I have some balanced in bonds, but not a lot at this age. And that's on purpose. However, I do feel like I've got quite a lot of exposure to the stock market, and I have not really hedged it much with other investment types like real estate or other things. So on a personal level, I have been educating myself more lately about real estate investing. To be honest, it's a whole new world for me, and it's a pretty intimidating learning curve. Although I will say it's got a real bonus benefit because it's putting me back in a state of beginner's mind. And, there are so many people out there willing to say like, oh, I do this better than you. Like, oh, it's not rocket science, like making me feel stupid as I approach it. And it just reminds me of how I think a lot of you might feel as you start your own investment journey for the first time, because it feels weird. If you have never made an investment in your life and then you buy your first index fund, bit of chunk of index funds, it feels scary, right? And you don't want people around you making you feel stupid or that you've overlooked something or that they know how to do it really well, implying that you don't, right? So getting into a new area that I don't know well, in my case, real estate investing, it gives me it renews my sense of empathy for you, for the people that I'm teaching about, basic investment principles, because I am feeling again that sense of like, oh my God, all these people around trying to make me feel like shit as I step into a brand new world. So I'm doing it this time with a lot more confidence and a lot more track record behind me. And that feels good. But it is making me remember how intimidating it can feel to start a new type of investment for yourself. So I have this chunk of money. I am thinking about using it as a down payment on a real estate investment, although I'm going to be honest with you, the math is not mathing very easily these days. Real estate used to be more of a no-brainer. It's getting harder now as mortgage rates go up so high. A lot of stuff that worked 2 years ago does not work anymore. So clearly, I don't think like real estate investing is over, not by any stretch, but it's hard. It's a hard moment right now in the real estate market. So I'm still learning. I still have that money kind of in a holding pattern. If I were being perfectly smart, I should put it in a money market account so it earns, 4 to 5% interest as I'm doing my research. I shouldn't have it in cash. I do have it in cash at the moment. I should put it in a money market fund. Like I said, I'm not perfect. I probably will make that phone call to the bank within the next week or two. Maybe I'm going to say that out loud to give myself some accountability so that I force myself to do it. Okay. So that's basically what I've been doing with my money. That's my own sort of money voyage. I want you to really reflect on the fact that I'm not doing things perfectly. I'm doing pretty good. I'm aiming for about 80%. I'm doing basically the right thing, a little bit rough cut sometimes. It's not perfection, but it's pretty damn good. And that's really how I advocate you think about your own money. You don't have to spend every minute of your time in front of a spreadsheet. In fact, I don't think that's really a valuable use of your life unless you truly enjoy it. And there are people like that. I'm not one of them. So I basically try to do the right thing with my money, and then I just go live my life. But I will say that rinsing and repeating is the magic. So you'll notice that my story is I did this one time and it was like, ugh, it felt weird. Then I did it again, and I did it a little more smartly the next time. And then I did it again, and I'm using even a little bit more skill with the third time, right? So rinsing and repeating, learning from your mistakes, refining as you go. This is my mantra. Never perfection, only improvement. The other thing I want to just briefly mention that I do with my money, and this is an all the time thing. This is from day one. This is like my personal religion, is I put all the money I can into tax advantaged retirement accounts and other kinds of accounts. So the big one for me is a 401k plan. So I, as soon as I started running payroll for Sunlight Tax, I'm an S Corp, so I pay myself on payroll. I started a 401k plan. And yes, when I've had employees, they're a part of it. And I really believe in that. I like to practice what I preach economically. So I do a 4% employer match. Anytime I've had employees, they have been automatically enrolled in my 401k plan, and I do 4% matching. I'm an employee of Sunlight Tax, and so I do a 4% match of my own 401k. I put in the maximum allowable amount every single year. That's a non-negotiable to me. And in a sense, that is profit first, because I'm just saying this is a non-negotiable. I always will put in the maximum to my retirement account. Everything else, I go from there. So I'm putting in the max employee side contribution to my 401k, plus I do a 4% employer match. Also, at the end of the year, I like to do some year-end planning. I get my books together. This is, of course, something I teach in Money Bootcamp, but I get my books together towards the end of the year. I take a look at what my expenses are, what my options are for tax sheltered accounts for the end of the year. So when you have a solo 401k, you can make a contribution as the employer. You can make additional contributions even after the year's end. So I always look at what my options are there. Sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm not going to say I always do the same thing, but I always look at it. I always look at it every single year. So that might be something. Hopefully that was helpful for you to see how I do it, to see how perfection is not getting in my way. I'm doing it anyway. But how I basically learned how to handle my money in a way that's relatively smart. And if that is sounding maybe kind of interesting to you, I hope it opens a door in your mind, like, oh, maybe that is something I could do. Remember, 20 years ago, I would have looked at this and been like, that's bananas. I'll never have money. I'll never have sophistication like that. I'll never do any of that. Here I am today on the totally opposite end of that, right? And that could be you too. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, basically that is what Money Bootcamp is all about. You might think of it as the tax side, where I teach you, how to set up your bookkeeping and estimate what quarterly taxes you owe and how to pay them in. And Money Bootcamp does do that. But the other half of Money Bootcamp is learning how to handle your money, how to grow your wealth, how to make smart investment decisions. So I teach investing. I teach year-end planning, which is like the sort of annual review, where you look at your options and you put extra money in your various tax advantaged accounts. And I teach a whole part about saving like a millionaire using tax advantaged accounts, like a solo 401k, like a SEP IRA, like your Roth and traditional IRAs, like HSAs. So I teach a whole module about tax advantaged accounts and how they accelerate the growth of your money. And you can make your money go even further when it's in those accounts. So Money Bootcamp, if you haven't thought about it in a while, it's not just about getting yourself organized for taxes. It's about the long-term financial health, the bigger financial picture of growing your wealth, growing your financial security, growing your fuck you money. So if you feel like maybe you might want to just take a look at that, you are so welcome to. I joyfully invite you in to do what I have done and what I have taught thousands of other people to do. And you can just watch a free class where I talk about how I do this. I show you a graph of like how your money grows inside tax advantaged investment accounts. In this free class, I show you the power triangle, which is a concept I teach inside Money Bootcamp, which is just that. It's using tax advantaged accounts, using tax planning, and investing. Okay, that's the power triangle, the wealth building Fuck you money building power triangle. So if you want to watch that free class and just get an orientation on kind of how to do these things, like what it is you actually need to do and how I teach you to do it inside Money Bootcamp, feel free to take a watch. It's a free class. It's 1 hour, and it will kind of let you know what the deal is with Money Bootcamp and how it works. So you can go to that class if you're interested at go.sunlighttax.com/register. It's free. You'll get some emails just prompting you to show up for the class. And again, it's go.sunlighttax.com/register. Also, if you show up at the initial time that you book to watch that class, you will get access to a special bonus where you get a free one-on-one consultation with me. So that's just a little bonus that's in there I thought I'd let you know about. Anyway, so I hope that this has been enjoyable for you to listen to. I hope you feel a sense of hope. I am so grateful to all of you for those messages that you have sent me that encourage me and give me meaning, truly. And I hope that it's been interesting for you to see my own money voyage and actually walk the walk that I teach. So thank you so much for listening. I cannot wait to talk to you soon on the next one. Bye.